Hello everybody, and welcome back to the channel. This is Michael, KE4EST, and I'm back here with part 2, or the conclusion, or whatever you want to call it, of this Knight Capacitor Checker. And you notice too, like I don't think I mentioned before, but there's no model number. I can't remember if I mentioned that in the first video, but as many times as I went through it and in post and editing it and all that, I can't remember. But this is before they, from best I can get from reading and stuff, whatever that's out there to read about some of these earlier Knight kit units, that's made by Allied Radio up in Chicago. They didn't put any model numbers on them or anything, so if anybody's wondering about that and saying, well, where's the model number at? You didn't put a model number. What model number is this if I want to look it up or whatever? And they didn't put them. I mean, I've got the manual on it, and it doesn't say anything in the manual about a model number. All it does, it says copyright 1955. And somewhere I was reading it said I think these come out in 53, so I don't know. I couldn't find anything else besides a forum post where some guy said he thought they come out in 53. Maybe they did. Maybe they updated the manual, so that's why it's 55. I don't know. But anyway, so I went through this thing, and I've cleaned it up some. Some of these are just spots that just rust spots or whatever. I'm not, if I want to make this a shelf queen, there's some around, I'd have to take this and repaint this, and all that. It'd take a lot more, a lot more work. But anyway, so you can see what I've done here. The tube's checked out good. I took this one out and cleaned it up and put it back in. The front of it was all dusted up. I've cleaned these switches, and I've took a couple of them apart. And I didn't do a video on that, but maybe I should have to show you. But you can take these type of switches here apart. Let's see. Actually, I think I've got here's one. I have something else here. One of these switches here, you can bend these little tabs back here and pull this apart. And they've got the little pieces are in there kind of like this here, and then there's another piece of metal that slides over it like this here, and it just slides back and forth. It'll be like this. Let me zoom out. It'll be kind of like this, say, if it's on-off switch. Then you slide the plastic piece on top here, and it'll, of course, it's got more fingers on both sides. I've got one finger on this side, just one thumb. I can't put, not abnormal, so I can't show you 4. But anyway, I have 2 prongs come down. It'll be sitting kind of like that if it's off, and then it slides in and connects. Have one on both sides, or to connect those 2 together. And if it's something like this here, it's double pole, it'll have them on both sides, and it'll just slide from one side over to the other side, back and forth. And sometimes you can spray up in there and run them back and forth, and spray the cleaner up in there and run them back and forth, and they just won't. They still kind of intermittent. I still think I've got one on this that's acting a little intermittent, but you have to take it apart. And that's one reason I dug this one up out of the junk box. I was going to replace it, then I was like, wait a minute. I took it and cleaned it up. You can put them in, you can take a wire brush to them and clean them up. Just real careful like, or soak them in a little white vinegar or something a little bit, and go over them. And then put just a dab of oil in there on the other side, and then it'll slide back and forth. It's got another piece of wire in there, kind of sticks up like this, gives it a little spring tension, so that it don't just, if you turn it to this position, it'll just fall back down. So that's how those work. But I had to go through those and clean them up pretty good. They was really bad. But let's see, the capacitor off of it, it was still showing 420 something ohms, supposed to be 470k, so I replaced it. These here, these micro capacitors, they did check out okay. I had a comment from the first video. Guy said that these were second rate and they were made in New York City, somewhere up there, back when he was younger and working on, you know, I guess he worked at a factory or something. Maybe he just knew about them or something. Maybe he didn't exactly say, but they tested out okay and they seem to be working okay. So I left those. All the other capacitors checked almost, you know, you've seen some of them. The rest of them checked out close enough, or, you know, within 10% anyway. Now this capacitor here is kind of odd. This was a 20 microfarad capacitor that was across here. It was this one here that came out of it. And I replaced it with, this reason it looks a little goofy, and so I've not trimmed the leads on it. I've just put that in there temporarily because I got drawers full of these things, and I'm completely out of 22 microfarad. I'd normally replace it with like a 22 microfarad. Completely out. So instead of waiting for one part, this is a 33 microfarad and it's radial, you know, it sticks out the bottom of the can, so I just kind of spread them across and just, I didn't have to come and ground it where it was grounded there. I just found another ground spot. And then something like this, you know, be fine. Some people will say, oh, you got to keep them right on it. For one, this is a piece of test equipment. It's not an audio amplifier, nothing like that. And it doesn't have a tube rectifier in it, you know, for the rectification. It's got, you know, this big diode here, so we can handle this a little bit more. But yeah, you got to be careful. You know, say this is 20 microfarad, you want to put 100 microfarad in there. If you had some way to slowly bring it up the voltage every time you turned it on, it'd be fine. It'd be nice and smooth filtered, wouldn't it, at 100 microfarads? But the initial, you know, surge trying to charge that capacitor up, you know, if you get too high, it can blow the bonding wire off your cathode on your rectifier tube. Of course, this is not a rectifier tube here, but I was just using it for an example. But it'll go in there and it'll blow that, you know, could blow it off and burn it up or whatever. So in this case, though, it was, you know, fine. I just went 33 microfarad. A lot of times these old ones anyway, you know, new out of the box would be, it'd say 20, it might be 30, it might test 32, it might test 18. They really wasn't as stringent with it back then, you know, on these. And the voltage too, it says 150 volts on it. Sometimes you throw this across, you know, 175 up to 200 volts and still be just fine. I wouldn't want to do that, but I mean, but now these modern day ones like this, here's a 450. You put 451 volts on that, it'll pop it a lot of times. You better go right up to just leave you some head space before you get to 450. And if it's a higher circuit, you know, put some in parallel or series parallel situation, if seeing what kind of capacitance you need or whatever, because you can, these new ones, they don't take kindly to going over voltage like the old ones did. But enough of that. So replace that, replace this, and that resistor, cleaned everything up, really had to go through the switches. So let's take this thing and fire it up, and we'll go. The alignment on these things is real easy. But I'll go ahead and plug it in over here. Remember too, when you're working on stuff like this, this one don't have super high voltage in it, but it's got high voltage in it up to, I think, like 160 or 70 volts. Enough to give you a really good buzz. So let me back this out, move that just a little bit. I think I'll just take that light off right now, turn it on here. Yep, tubes are lighting up. And there you go. See our eyes lit up here. Okay, so let me go over the really quick alignment procedure for this thing. I mean, it's not a whole lot to it. Where did you go in here? This one's one you about don't need. If you've been doing it for a while, you don't even need this alignment instructions, but I'm going to read it like it says out of the book. Or kind of paraphrase it. It says make sure you, once you got it all built, put the tubes in, turn it on, let it warm up, or plug it in. Do not plug it into DC. See, back then there's a lot of, you know, circuits that run off DC too. This one's do not plug into DC. Place the front panel switches in the following positions. On-off switch to on, which we got. The test switch to test. And the open short test to open, which we got. You see that? That one there still needs a little work done to it there. Just barely, be very careful when you're grabbing this stuff and watch where you're putting your fingers. I'm going to turn the light back on. But take you a tuning tool. I'm going to use a plastic one because some of these, you know, they can have voltage on up here. This one, let's see, has it got, where's that schematic at? No, this thing can have voltage on it, but some of them can. And if you take a metal one, especially if it's metal all the way up and touch it, you can get yourself shocked. Or if you accidentally touch the metal to one of these side screws or something, you can. Let me bring this camera up here. You can short something out there. So what we're going to be doing is adjusting that right there. And I'm going to turn it back around so you can see the front of it. Now, I think you can see that just fine with the light on. Allow 15 minutes for it to warm up. You can see I've not let it 15 minutes warm up. If you're doing this, you've restored one of these, let it warm up. Be sure, let me talk about these test leads. It says be sure these test leads ain't touching or anything. Okay. I've cleaned that up. You can see this here, being it's a little bit older and stuff, it's not too bad. I did replace the line cord. I failed to mention that. It was, you know, it was cracked up in place. You could see the copper through it. So I just threw it away and put another one on it. But this, I replaced it with, because there's a lot of, I was looking at different ones, because this don't say in the book what kind of coax they're using. And this has no markings on this coax. I've looked with the glasses on, magnifying glass, if it just faded out. There's nothing on here showing what coax this is. So I got some, I think it was RG62, which is a 93 ohm coax. And there's some other ones, you know, I looked up, researched, you know, different brands and these. It's got about the same circuit and stuff. Now we're using 93 ohm coax. That's okay, that's just what I'll do. You can get plenty of RG62. I got a little small roll of it. I cut me a piece 4 foot off of it and made up nice little pretty ends on it, done everything, put it on there. And I did the initial just kind of going through it. I couldn't get it to work right. So I thought, well, what's wrong with this thing? So I did some troubleshooting and I couldn't find anything wrong with anything. So I thought, well, you know, if this stub here, like it says, it's got to be right, is wrong. Something's wrong with this. So I went and cleaned this up and put this back on, cleaned this end up, put everything back. It says this needs to be a little bit longer. I've got it zoomed in there, but it says make this a little longer. So I've done everything like it said, nice and pretty, cleaned it up, used some heat shrink tubing on that instead of just some old black tape or whatever. But put it on there, it started acting normal again. Or it started acting like, you know, it should act. It hadn't acted normal yet, but it started acting like it should act, and I was like, okay. So, and this is about 44 inches long, and it's still working okay. Somebody's cut it a little bit short, but it's working, so we'll just go with that. Anyway, that gives us time for it to let it warm up some more, huh? Okay, so you let it warm up. It says make sure these are not touching here. Let's see. Do not hold them. Use a small screwdriver. Adjust trimmer C4. This is the one I showed you. For maximum shadow on the magic eye tube. There are two positions of adjustment of C4 where the eye tube will be open, maximum shadow. Either position is correct. There should be little or no difference noticed in the amount of shadow when the test switch is switched back and forth. Okay, so we got that. Let me get in here and get on this. And I'll turn that. Whoop. See there where I went to maximum. And it's a little bit. I can turn it just a hair. It's moving just a little bit, but that should be fine there. You're not doing any quantitative measurements or anything with it. And that's it. It's done. So now if you've got a good capacitor, and I've got one laying here somewhere. If we've got it in the open side, it's on test. Let's put in a good capacitor. And it should close, and you see it closed. Showing the capacitor's good. Okay. See that? Now if I go to short test, you still see that's a little, look at that. I'll have to clean that again. Go down. In the short test, I'll put it across the, it's staying closed, it stayed closed. See, capacitor is a good capacitor. We can simulate a shorted capacitor. I'll short them leads together there, and look, the eye opened up. So when I take it out, it closed. So either position this is in the short test, it should remain open if it's defective. So if I short these together, they're either shorted together, so I'm simulating, okay, it's bad, and it's saying, yep, it's remain open, so this capacitor is bad. If I put it across the capacitor, see, if it's good, it's going to stay closed. So, I mean, that's it. Not a whole lot to it, but now you can take one of these and, you know, if you got some old test equipment, especially if it's, or not test equipment, some old equipment, especially if it's audio equipment for you audio guys who kind of want to try to keep some of the capacitors in there, you can run through them, you know. But like I've always said, just be real careful doing that. You know, what you really want to do is, you know, a lot of people don't understand. They say it's the capacitor, man. It's that kind of capacitor it is. It's not the kind of capacitor it is. What it is the capacitor is starting to leak, you know, internally, electrically leak. Not leaking goo out of it, but it's starting to, you know, turn into a resistor. So get you some really high value giga ohm resistors. Replace it with a modern day good capacitor, and then or take your capacitor out and measure it with a good, you know, if you're really into that stuff, building stuff all the time, you know, you want to buy you a good meter to go up in the giga ohms and see how many giga ohms you read across that capacitor. Replace it with pick a good one, throw a resistor across it, you know, giga ohm resistor close to it, and you'll find that same sounds right back again. And this ain't slowly getting worse and worse. If it's one of these and it's slowly getting worse and worse, then you're going to turn it on for it to warm up. You get your guitar out and you're going to go in the room, get you a cup of coffee or something, whatever. You come back in, you got the room's full of smoke where you've fried a transformer or something, or a choke, or blowed something out. So that's a little tip there I've always told people for years, and I see that if you watch my channel, you watch Paul Carlson's channel over there at Mr. Carson's Lab. He keeps telling the same thing. I'm like, yes, somebody else gets it. You know, it's not the type of capacitor it is. It's because the capacitor's old and starting to leak internally. You know, and that's why it's, you know, it's causing the next stage is drawing a little bit more current on the grid. You know, and so it's driving the tube a little bit harder. And you know, if it's not real bad, and you know, you can get away with it. Now, if it's really, really bad, you're just going to go through tubes all the time, and that's just kind of silly. But if it's just minor and it's a rugged tube, and you know, especially if you're not on stage, you know, 300 days out of the year, you know, or whatever, you know, and you're just in your own house listening to your own music or playing your own guitar or whatever, just for yourself, you know, you can get away with it because you're not going to have the amp on, you know, hours and hours a day, you know, or whatever. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this. If you did, give me a like. Don't forget to reach down and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this. And until the next one, this is Michael, KE4EST 73.